Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Good piece by our friend Gerard Baker over at the Wall Street Journal about elite groupthink when it came to, well, the latest iteration, when it came to the potential that the virus, COVID, leaked from the virology lab in Wuhan. Baker writes, or reminds us, I should say, letters in the Lancet and Nature in the early days of the pandemic from an impressive constellation of experts dismissed the lab leak idea. In fact, in Nature, it was denounced as a conspiracy theory, like it was by politicians. He goes on to say, in each field, science, government, media, tech, there were surely independent-minded people who did seek the truth, but they were no match for the groupthink and the cover-up. And this comparison contrasts as we're focused on our moral indignation in the direction of the Chinese communists. He writes, it seems increasingly likely that Chinese officials mishandled research and misrepresented and misinformed the public. But they did so under pain of punishment, even death, in a system designed to suppress that kind of information. In this country, constitutionally protected, free and independent scientists, bureaucrats, journalists, and others did the same. What's their excuse? Ooh, that stings. For more on this, as well as where we stand, pleased to be joined again by Dr. Marty Makary, who's a professor at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and Bloomberg School of Public Health. He's the chief medical advisor to Sesame Care and author of the award-winning The Price We Pay, What Broke American Healthcare and How to Fix It, which is now available in paperback as of this week, so pick that up. Dr. Makary, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, great to be with you guys.
What about that comment? We're pounding Chinese scientists and the Chinese communist overlords there. You understand what the scientists are under in China. What about our scientists?
Well, first of all, that article by Jerry Baker, the editor of the Wall Street Journal, was probably the best article I've read in years. And I thought it was particularly interesting and amusing how he said the medical community beclowned themselves by declaring certain protests okay and others unacceptable, depending on what the political cause was.
Right.
And he's right. The groupthink has moved into healthcare and medicine. And it's, as a scientist, look, I've been at Johns Hopkins 20 years doing public health research. I've published hundreds of scientific articles, been dealing with the medical journals for years, and there's too much groupthink, and the cancel culture now has given them this iron fist to start completely eliminating other opinions, and it's scary. And the good news is enough folks who have been suppressed and canceled now are basically banding together and saying, we got to demand more equity and fairness.
So you think that boomerang is happening, or rebalancing, if you will, is happening, as opposed to just more people being afraid and those, I call them sentimental barbarians, call them what you like, those sentimental barbarians continuing to, run the field.
Yeah, just look at transgender surgery. You can't say a single freaking word about it unless you'll get your career entirely destroyed if you do. Now, enough people now, if you saw the 60 Minutes 2 weeks ago, are saying, hey, wait a minute, look at these kids here getting talked into it, then they have huge regrets, and the process was really shoddy. 2 20-minute visits with a psychiatrist, and you get slapped with a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, and then boom, you're in the operating room having this mutilating surgery in somebody who shouldn't. Now, there are candidates and there are transgender people who have been underappreciated, but you can't talk about this issue, okay? You cannot talk about it, and there's enough of this nonsense going on now where we're saying enough of the cancel culture in science.
Well, do they allow gender reassignment surgery at Johns Hopkins?
No, we don't do it. Now, there are kids who are truly transgender biologically and genetically.
Yes.
And so in those cases, there is, and that's been standard of care for decades. That is done and has been done. But the idea that somebody's angry or unhappy and therefore tries a different gender, or you got schools in California where a quarter of the 9-year-olds in the schools say they don't identify with any one gender. Oh, we've got to speak up. Please. We can't be silent on this issue.
Getting back to COVID, although I appreciate those comments, you had a piece recently in the Wall Street Journal too, another editorial, excellent editorial, and I love the fact that you dug this kernel up from Dr. Fauci last August, August 13th to be precise, as you write, when cases are fewer than 10 per 100,000, quote, you should be able to open up safely and clearly. Well, as you point out, we achieved that milestone mid-May, so why the lethargy in states like, I don't know, Illinois?
Yeah, look, Dr. Fauci totally contradicted himself. I won't pick on him. You know, he's had a bad week.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
he brought it on himself.
And look, I've disagreed with Dr. Fauci and told him this almost on every single thing of the pandemic. He was a little helpful in the middle of the pandemic in encouraging people to wear masks. But otherwise, it's been very frustrating. Now, look, I respect him. I think he does have good intentions. But the reality is that we can't keep moving the goalposts, and that's what we've done. The perception of risk right now in America is totally distorted. I mean, I went for ice cream with some friends, Dan and Amy, two nights ago, and said, can I try the strawberry ice cream? And they said, no, we're not doing samples because of COVID. And I'm thinking, I can go without the ice cream, but if this is the mentality that's keeping our schools shut and businesses impaired and our airports look like ghost towns right now, then it's sad for the American worker.
Well, like you just mentioned masks, and I just want to know your personal opinion. And as a doctor, do you think masks work?
I do think masks work, but it's the quality of the mask. So if you're wearing a loose cloth mask, I think it's not going to help much. And it's more the ventilation than it is the mask. I've been wearing masks as a surgeon. I do mostly public health research, but I'm trained as a surgeon and still do surgery. I don't think my patients want me doing surgery without a mask. I am a believer in masks. As you know, I wrote the first piece calling for universal masking in the pandemic in the New York Times in the spring of last year. Took a lot of heat for it. I just thought it was an easy thing for us to flip on and still have a open economy. And that was the path to living a semi-normal life during the pandemic without the lockdowns.
Yeah.
At this point, though, we got to take them off. We got to take
The
them off.
pandemic's over.
Well, here's the thing, and by the way, the pandemic was over in exactly the time frame you predicted previously in the Wall Street Journal it would be over. It's worth noting that in terms of comparing and contrast people who know what they're talking about versus Tony Fauci. But with respect to the mask thing, so here's the thing, and I appreciate that you're staying in your lane and you're thinking about this from sort of a medical perspective. But the problem is, you know, it's inherently political because politicians are making public health decisions. And once you give them that mass power and you think, oh, well, this is a way for us to keep open, it's a misunderstanding. I'm sorry, but they're going to take that and they're also going to lock down, which is exactly what they did. Because this is always about sort of micromanaging people that they consider liabilities to be managed rather than assets to be allowed to flourish. And so while I appreciate like what you were saying early on about universal masking as the way to maintain more openness, light touch, like some states pursued, Florida, South Dakota, it was never going to be that way in most of the states because of the attitude of the politicians in those states.
Why do people want this pandemic to keep going? I mean, we've met all the criteria, and they keep moving the goalposts and wear masks even though they're vaccinated, as if there's like almost like a pseudo pandemic going on right now. It's a very low level of infection. Daily cases today. Let's take a look. Dan and Amy today. Daily cases. Okay, we're below 14,000. I bet you on Monday we'll be below 10,000 cases. Remember, we had over 250,000 a day in just 4 months ago, and the number of cases today, daily cases today, compared to daily flu cases in the middle of a mild flu season, we've got about 14,000. Middle of a mild flu season, 400,000. We're about 1/50th the number of daily virus cases today with COVID as we are of a flu.
Don't you think Dr. Fauci is the one that wants to keep this going? I mean, now this morning we're learning about this Delta variant. That's the one that ravaged India, and that they claim that kids 12 to 20 are getting that at a rapid rate. But yet I called Lurie's Children's Hospital, and their hospitalization is exactly what it was 1 week ago.
And Lurie's would know. They're an incredible children's hospital, and they're seeing people from around the world, too, I'm sure. Look, in the UK, there were about 130 hospitalizations with this variant from India. We call it Delta. And we think 3 may have been in people that received some vaccine, maybe 1 dose, no one knows. Let's stop with the variant fear mongering. We've had hundreds of variants, 0 of them have evaded the life protecting power of vaccinations or natural immunity, as I just talked about in today's Wall Street Journal piece.
But before we get to that, you mentioned something about this flu. What is the flu? Who gets
influenza A and B?
I didn't
That thing?
I didn't know the flu was still a thing. I hadn't heard anything about it recently. That's still a thing. The flu? People get the flu still? Okay, natural immunity. Your piece there. So Washington State has given away a dope for people to take the vaccine. In order to get to the Biden threshold, should we be a little bit more aggressive with our prizes, more addicting prizes like meth or heroin in order to get people to get vaccinated, get to that 70%
We've got
level?
booze. Now we've got a joint for a jab. So what else?
Prostitution. I know they're moving to legalize it in Oregon. Yeah. So prostitution. What do we need to? What vices do we need to feed, doctor, in order to get to 70%?
Well, look, United Airlines is offering some miles. To me, that makes sense. Okay, that's fine. But California is going to spend $116 million to give free money to people to take the vaccine, even though 80 to 85% of adults in the United States have immunity now, if you count natural immunity plus vaccinated immunity. The world is laughing at us. Okay, the world is laughing at us right now. We have this massive vaccine surplus while people and our own neighbors in Brazil are dying of COVID, high-risk, vulnerable people. And we've got this surplus, and we're trying to give 2 doses to every healthy kid in America and pay people. The world is laughing at us.
Well, there's an Oxford University professor wrote a piece of basically we're selfish Americans, and we're vaccinating kids who aren't super spreaders, who aren't giving it to the grandparents as once thought, and they're not dying from it. More kids die in a school bus accidents than they'd have from COVID. So why don't we give them away? Why is this push? We'll only get unmasked for our kids in school if they're vaccinated.
Well, I'll have a piece tomorrow in MedPage today. I'll post it on social on that exact issue. A lot of doctors are angry right now. I mean, we're using the precious global vaccine supply to give 2 doses to healthy kids where, look, I'm not even sure healthy kids need the vaccine. If a kid has a comorbidity, that case is there. If they're healthy, the case is barely there, but it's not compelling. And who said you have to do 2? I mean, who says you have to do 2? It's a free country. There was an old dictum in medicine that said if you give a blood transfusion, you have to give two units of blood. Well, guess what? We realized after 20 years you don't. You can give somebody 1. And so if I had a kid who it made sense to get vaccinated, I would do 1 dose. By the way, we learned about those heart complications, 7 cases of kids who got heart complications, hospitalized. They all survived it, but they were in the hospital within 4 days of getting the 2nd dose of their mRNA vaccine. That tells you that maybe we're doing too many doses.
Speaking of the vaccines, do you think there is an underreporting of adverse outcomes from the vaccines?
There's an underreporting of adverse events of every single thing in medicine, every medication, every device, and that's because we have this shoddy system of voluntarily allowing folks to self-report. Did anyone, presumably you got your vaccines, did anyone call you a month later and just say, just want to follow up and see if you had any complications? No, we don't do post-vaccine or any surveillance of anything FDA approved. And I would not even blame the FDA for it. I would say this is a system that the pharmaceutical and device industry has ensured stays in place, because if you're big pharma or the device industry, do you want to create a robust surveillance system to look for complications after the FDA approves something? No, you want it to be out there in the market.
With respect, just going back to the natural immunity and what you talked about in your piece, one of the reasons why we're doing this, we're still stockpiling vaccines, not sharing with people who are in greater need, vulnerable populations around the world, is because you have politicians and TV doctors having fun with numbers. And so they're not, you mentioned 80 to 85%. No. They're more in the 50 to 60% range because it's only vaccinations. There's no consideration of natural immunity.
I can create two totally different scenarios for you by presenting two totally different statistics. I could tell you that 85% of the adult population is immune, and kids are really inefficient transmitters. And we know from Israel, when you have a lot of adults immunized, the infection rates of kids go way down. That's a positive message. That's what I believe to be true, and that's what I'm saying. That's what's in the Wall Street Journal today. What I wrote is that about 85% of adults in the U.S. have immunity. Now, I could be Dr. Fauci and Dr. Walensky and play fear-mongering and try to manipulate and coax people into a vaccine by saying only 41% of the U.S. population is fully vaccinated. And we have to get to 85. Well, you can't. I mean, it's impossible. How are you going to get there? The situation now is dire if you present that statistic, and you need mandates and coaxing kids and demonizing those who are hesitant and blowing off people with natural immunity and say, well, just get it anyway, even though we don't know the data. We do have the data, by the way, and I outline that data in today's piece.
That is a very good Dr. Fauci impersonation you do. I'm impressed. Dr. Marty Makary, professor at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, Bloomberg School of Public Health, chief medical advisor to Sesame Care, author of the award-winning The Price We Pay, What Broke American Healthcare and How to Fix It, which is available in paperback this week. So pick that up and check out his piece in the Journal, which I tweeted out as well. Dr. Makary, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, great to be with you as always. Thanks so much.
Love having you on. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560.